we're going to talk about the Jags and the Bears as the first game that we saw in the Sunday slate. This was the London game, the overseas game that we saw yesterday. Chicago put it on them, 35-16. It continues to be a disappointing year from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we'll give the Bears their kudos. We'll talk about their top 5 graded players first because that's what we got to do. They won the game. They deserve the honor there. The number 1 graded player, minus quarterbacks, because I know we're about to get that. Safety Kevin Byard, 85.3. Overall grade in this game, edge rusher Montez Sweat had an 81.5. Offensive tackle Darnell Wright with a 78.2. Safety Elijah Hicks with a 78.1. And then cornerback Kyler Gordon with a 77.2. Caleb Williams, number 1 overall pick, would have been number 1 on this list had we not been separating quarterbacks, because if you're new here, that's what we do. We separate the quarterbacks so we can talk about them anyways, but I know we're about to dig into Caleb Williams here in a few minutes about what could be most impressive about him. But on the other side of things for Jacksonville, one player played really well, and that was safety Andre Sikkema. And, he had some choice words after the game. I don't know if you saw that, Dalton, where I asked him, what's going on with the team? And amongst other things, within his answer, he said, feels like there's a lot of quit on this team, which is not a good thing to say only 6 weeks into the season. Tight end Brenton Strange, he was next on the list, but Andre Sikkema at 90.3 overall grade, an elite, fantastic grade, and then it drops all the way to a 74.3 for Brenton Strange. Number 3, Josh Hines-Allen with a 72.0, offensive tackle Cam Robinson an equal 72.0, and then tight end Evan Ingram, a fantastic day. The entire passing offense was going through Evan Ingram in his return, 69.7. Trevor Lawrence, a 77.6 overall grade. It felt like outside of that one long drive that the Jags had at the beginning of the game, it was just all Bears from that point out. What was the stat that told the story here, Dalton?
For me, I think what we've seen the last 3 weeks after the game in Indianapolis where the Bears just threw the football way too much. I think Williams had, 58 pass attempts in that game? Somewhere
high
around
50s.
there. Way
Can't remember
too
exactly
much.
what it was, but yeah.
The last 3 weeks, they've gotten under center more. They've put an emphasis on running the ball, and they figured out how they can run the ball. Okay, so the stat for me on a baseline level is 5.2 yards per carry. That's the best of the season for the Bears. Finding balance was huge. Getting the ball out of Williams' hand less than it was is big time. Okay, big thing for me. Offensive line, still not spectacular, right? We know they're not great at running between the tackles. So what are we doing? We're going to run off tackle. We're going to get back to Shane Waldron, basic outside zone, some toss sweep. We can pull some guards out there, kind of pin pull stuff, get off tackle. 5.3 yards per carry off tackle is also a season high. And their offensive line, when they did get off tackle, had an 81.7 run blocking grade. Look, this team is loaded at the skill positions, and DeAndre Swift has been really good the last couple weeks. They've mixed in Roschon Johnson too. The receivers are obviously great. Keenan Allen, I thought, looked the best at any point, the best in this game that he has at any point this year, but they're loaded with athletes that they want to use out in space. Get outside, right? Don't make this offensive line try to maul people on the inside, because that's not their strong suit, right? They are not going to line up and run power, in the B gap and run people over. That's not it. And Caleb Williams, honestly, the way he operates, think about back at USC, getting the ball to playmakers in space, right? That's what you're getting right now. But it starts with the run game. Running off tackle, getting Williams on the bootleg, especially from under center. Mm-hmm. And then when we want to pick up the tempo and space things out, then we can use the quick game to space things out. Caleb Williams had a season-low average depth of target. This is where it's getting to. The Bears, it's more of that, almost like the Chiefs, right? Where it's like just that quick, get the ball to somebody in space, play kind of basketball, let Caleb be the point guard and distribute the ball. But to me, it starts with getting under center more the last 3 weeks, figuring out what works in their run game and sticking to it.
Yeah, just for conversation's sake, I'll skip to my most impressive, and it was a little bit of what you talked about there. It was the Bears' pass game diversity to me. I mean, all of the different options that Caleb Williams felt very, very comfortable going to. Cole Kmet, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, DJ Moore, all of those players I just named had more than 2 targets in the game and at least 2 catches in this game for 20 yards, 25 yards, 28 yards, 40 yards, 41, 70. You had the 2 touchdowns to Kmet, the 2 touchdowns to Keenan Allen. Obviously, having Keenan Allen out there and healthy is huge for them, especially with that veteran presence. But it was just the overall diversity to me of how comfortable Caleb Williams felt throwing the ball to anybody, right? Because I think that we see this, I think, a lot around the league, not just with young quarterbacks. They get very fixated on one guy. It's like, okay, this is the wide receiver one. I need to keep this player happy. And it does feel like everyone's sort of just all in it together. Now, has it looked perfect for the Bears this season? Obviously, it hasn't. But to me, that was the most impressive. Is like you said, Caleb not feeling like he has to be this Superman type of a player with a huge average depth of target like what we saw at USC. Very comfortable being that point guard, being that Rajon Rondo, that distributor. Let the other dudes shine. They can get the double digits, and we're going to continue to win football games. And I think that Caleb Williams, obviously, I'm not trying to say that he didn't have a good game himself, but as a facilitator, that's something that you really wanted to see from him. My side that told the story, I'll go the opposite side of praising the Bears' pass game. The Jags secondary, I mean, it is not what it needs to be. I mentioned that Andre Cisco, their safety after the game, he got the one interception in this one. And then after the game, he's talking about, hey, you can tell when we're all playing together. You feel that confidence when you're out on the field that you know that this guy's going to be in the right spot, this guy's going to lock down this dude, whatever it is, and you feed off of that. That's what chemistry in the secondary really is. We talk about chemistry on the offensive line, chemistry in the secondary just as paramount, honestly, because there's even more ground to cover. He said afterwards, you can tell that we're not in sync. And he sort of was saying, like, we don't really know where everybody's going to be because not everybody's giving it their best effort. And any time that you're not running 100%, well, then I can't count on you being where you need to be if you're not running 100%, if you're not giving your all. Obviously, I'm sitting up here at the desk. I'm not on the field playing these games. So I don't want people to be like, oh, look at him. He's accusing these guys of not playing. I'm just taking the words of the teammate who was in front of the microphones and the camera yesterday trying to call people out because it's not pretty in Jacksonville right now. When you look at Cisco, he had an 89.5 coverage grade. Nobody else was above a 64. 64 was the next highest. You go all the way from 89.5 to 64, it cannot be that big of a gap. It's got to be a lot better, even with some of the guys in and out of the lineup like we have seen through the first 6 weeks. So for the Jags, it's a lot of things. There's inconsistencies on offense that I've talked about over the last couple of weeks, but specifically, now we're getting the defensive side. Now, unfortunately, it feels like we're talking about the Jags as, okay, Trevor Lawrence, kind of depending on where you are with the Trevor Lawrence discussion, that could be a coin flip, but you could say he's a good player. Josh Hines-Allen's a good player. How many other players are you really depending on every single week? And I think that's now the problem with the Jags is it feels way too inconsistent with him. And this week it was the coverage. So
yeah, I agree with that. And I think the other thing that plays into it too, they've continued to run a top 3 rate of man coverage. And I just have to wonder, even if you do have guys lagging a little bit in the effort, if they're just not believing, because it's been a tough start. It was a tough end to last season. It's a tough start to this season. You got guys trying to play one-on-one with Keenan Allen, with DJ Moore, with Rome Odunze. It's not that easy anyway, even with with those guys as talented as they are. So it could be a scheme thing. It could be an effort. It could be either way. The Jags are just not getting it done right now, really on either side of the ball. And they really, the way this Bears defense is playing as well, they couldn't afford to give up this many points.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the chat right now. October said this. Trevor Lawrence had to throw 4 touchdown passes on one drive before one of his guys would catch it, and that just gets right into my disappointing with the Jags wide receivers. Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas Jr. even, Gabe Davis, all of them at a drop. The whole group, it just doesn't feel like they're playing focused every single game, and now we're obviously having these conversations of how much longer does Doug Peterson have? Because once you start losing the locker room, once you start losing focus, that's truly when moving on from a head coach becomes something that you're talking about here. You talked about that with Robert Saleh here on the show over the last couple of weeks. Connor Rogers on the NFL Stock Exchange, our other NFL draft show that we have, he's talked about the Jets and how it's like it just has not looked they just have not looked like a focused team. Now you're looking at guys not running their hardest in the secondary, drops all around when it comes to your talented wide receivers. That's focus stuff. That's discipline stuff. That's motivation stuff. That's stuff that you got to be able to do when you're a pro. And that was my most disappointing is the Jags wide receiver. So just to chime in with the chat and agree with the chat who was talking about this as well. But what about you? Most impressive, most disappointing? We talked a lot about the Jags. You got anything for the Bears on this one?
Most impressive is absolutely Caleb Williams. This was by far the best game he's had so far.
Hey, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
It's going to be a battle for Rookie of the Year. It'll be a battle. No, I mean, he was just spectacular. And the biggest thing to me is the more that we see him, we know he can make the big improvised plays, right? We know he's an amazing athlete. He can do the off-platform stuff. But more and more you're seeing him comfortable within the system, all right? when he didn't move off his spot, which was the vast majority of the time in this game, 22 of 26 for 199 yards and all 4 touchdowns. He was in rhythm. He was staying in the pocket. He was getting to his second and third read. And when there were times to improvise, then he would do it. But it wasn't very often. This is the design for Caleb Williams in this game. And I know Jacksonville's struggling on defense, but this is still a rookie playing his, 6th game in the NFL. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a guy who's finding a rhythm within the system with the changes in Shane Waldron's system. And I'll be honest with you, I like that you mentioned the diversity in the pass game, because it's not just diversity in target share and things like that. It's diversity in concept, too. There's quick games sometimes in the gun with 10 or 11 personnel. There's 2 tight ends on the field. We're running play action off it. We're running bootlegs like Shane Waldron likes to run. There's a lot of different things that he's starting to pick up in the offense now. I like that it's a bit more conservative. It's in control, and he's playing. This was by far the most in control that he has played, and he did not feel the need to go out there and hit home runs, right? And then you see some of the special throws, right? The kind of back shoulder up the seam for the touchdown. I forget who he threw it to. The fade ball to Keenan Allen to the left. That was just an absolutely perfect throw. Then you start to see the special throws, but he's got to do things within the system, within structure, and he did that better than he has in any other game this year.
Yeah. Anybody who didn't get that when I was sort of sarcastically clapping for you, it's because you're a Jaden Daniels guy. You were a Jaden Daniels QB1 guy, and I'm just giving you a little bit of crap because you believe that it would take a little bit longer for Caleb Williams, and I think a lot of people thought that as well. But I think it's a really important thing to remember. Hey, we're 6 weeks into the season. Now we are seeing, Gordon is saying this in the chat as well. Hey, we're physically seeing improvement from Caleb Williams. Week 6. That's what you want to see. That's what you want to see from this dude. And so I think Bears fans have all the reason to be excited about what they saw yesterday. It's tough going across the pond, as they say, being able to play a different game, totally different time zone, especially them coming from, Central Time as well. So it's not like East Coast time coming straight over. So there's a lot of things that you're adjusting to. You're playing a team that's really desperate in Jacksonville, and also came out swinging, right? That first drive they had was beautiful by Jacksonville, and yet they stayed calm, they were collected, and the Bears were the better team for all 4 quarters. Most disappointing here before we move on.
Real quick, the Jags pass rush, too, just not there. We saw Trayvon Walker dominate the Colts last week. The whole team really didn't bring it this week. 58.4 team pass rush grade. Got 16 pressures, but 8 of them either cleanup or unblocked pressures. 3 sacks, but only 5 yards lost on those sacks for the Bears. Caleb Williams kind of holding the ball too long on only a couple of occasions. He was spectacular all day. A couple times he held it too long, then the Jags got there, but they had a hard time winning up front, getting any pressure on him either.
Yeah, I agree. Just to chime into the chat before we move on to the next game, they're talking about the Bears defense, giving them kudos. Absolutely should be giving the Bears kudos. Because,
are they the best secondary in football right now?
Well, I was just about to say, before this game, if you looked at before this game, they were 3rd in our database for overall coverage grade as a team at an 82.9, and just the defensive back, so just the corners and the safeties, they were 2nd in the NFL. So both of those categories extremely high for this team. They had 5 interceptions going into this one, 10 forced incompletions. This is an aggressive unit, and I wondered how they were going to play against a Jacksonville team that likes to push the ball deep down the field. Well, advantage Chicago. So if Caleb is playing the way that he is, and the defense is playing the way that they have been over the first 6 weeks, you're really talking about a team that can contend against anybody any given week, and one that's definitely got a chance at a good postseason berth in a couple of months. So